True comedy for ex-Jehovah's Witnesses comes in 3 different ways. We can make memes of the governing body and things Watchtower says.
Crooked, twisted, gnarled. Crooked, twisted, crooked, twisted, crooked, gnarled, crooked. It cannot be made straight.
We can watch as Watchtower almost memes itself with some level of self-awareness.
He said he wants to study.
Yeah, he wants to study you.
There was no yoking. I haven't yoked.
But this opens the door to the yoke.
I'm not stupid. You act like I don't know this.
But then my personal favorite comes along, where someone gets in front of a camera and says something so monumentally stupid, it becomes lore within the ex-Jehovah's Witness community.
About all they can do is bleat, bah. Goodbye, little sheep.
It's truly immortalized forever on the halls of the greatest comedy moments in Watchtower history. And boy howdy, do we got a real banger today. Let's do this.
A discussion of riches often centers on the danger of making material wealth the main thing in our life. Our text today is about riches, but the focus is on how we use the things that we possess.
This opening really cracked me up because, as you guys know, if you've been following the channel for a while, Watchtower has been releasing a veritable cascade of videos centered around giving money, donating money, making friends with God by donating money. Over and over again, they've been hammering it down, while also not doing anything in practical ways to actually help people. So Watchtower, I want you to just take 1 second and think about these words.
How we use the things that we possess.
How are you using your unrighteous riches to help people? How are you using those? Because you're certainly not out there providing food and water or shelter to people that need it. So what are you doing with your money? And if you're not doing any of those things, why do you still have a charitable tax-free status in most countries?
Make friends for yourselves by means of the unrighteous riches, so that when such fail, they may receive you into the everlasting dwelling places. There are certain aspects of this text that some have found difficult to understand. For example, why would a Christian even be in possession of unrighteous riches? Who are referred to by the pronoun they?
Okay, I'll need the Christians in the comment section to sound off on this one, but I would be hard-pressed to imagine that there are Christians that read this text and are scratching their heads, going bored ape, because they're like, what does unrighteous riches mean? Oh my God, I have no idea. I'm pretty sure everyone has a basic understanding that that's talking about the material things that are part of this world, right? I mean, that seems like a pretty basic thing. So, hey, maybe I'm crazy. So, yeah, if that is blatantly obvious to Christians, hey, let me know in the comments below. But I also find it funny that, oh man, Watchtower, they're really trying to sound cool now. Hey, what do we mean by the pronouns they? I mean, it was only a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, that they had that horrific anti-LGBTQ talk. Like, it was horrible, calling them pollution in the earth, like literally comparing them to pollution. It was so horrible. But hey, Watchtower, they're turning a new leaf. So what do they mean by those pronouns, they? See, we're hip with the lingo that the kids use on TikTok nowadays. Oh, this talk absolutely cracks me up.
If we look at Luke chapter 16, verse 1, it talks about a steward. If we look at the footnote, it says this could be a house manager. So it is someone who's entrusted with a good deal of responsibility. But it says that he is accused of handling his master's goods wastefully. Now, the wording of that verse allows for the possibility that the steward was slandered. It's possible the charges were false. But Jesus doesn't focus on the reason for the steward's dismissal. Rather, he gives attention to the steward's reaction. Verses 2 through 7 show us the reasoning of the steward knowing that he's going to be fired. He says, I'm not strong enough to dig, I'm ashamed to beg, so how am I going to make a living? So he decides to befriend ones who owe things to his master.
Normally, I know everyone's probably freaking out, probably already clicked off of the video. I don't play clips that are this long when they're talking about a scripture, but this one is absolutely fascinating. So he's talking about Luke 16 here, where Jesus is giving this illustration of a house manager that is dishonest. And in order to get out of his dishonesty, he is more dishonest. And he's telling this in front of his disciples, so that way the Pharisees hear him, because he's trying to kind of point at them, and it all works. Now, I don't know what sort of universe we're living in here. I feel like I'm watching a Doctor Strange movie or Ant-Man or something at this point. I don't know what this guy is come up with in his brain with this whole, well, if you look at the wording here, it could actually mean slandered or accused. So we don't know if he actually, the whole point of the illustration was that if you entrust someone with or little and they're honest, you can entrust them with much. And if you trust someone with little and they're dishonest, they will also be dishonest with much. And then he says the classic line, you can't slave for two masters. It's pretty straightforward and simple, but he is going off on this weird thing, and I think it's like one of those little portals we get into Watchtower's thinking when there is a scripture in the Bible that is deliberately talking about mismanaging funds and mishandling finances. They are immediately going to, well, we don't know if this person in this illustration that maybe never actually happened, we don't know if they were actually talking about mismanaging funds. Maybe it was just an accusation. Maybe it was just slander. Who really knows? But Jesus really focuses on how he reacted. I don't even know how this man has come up with this little narrative and how he thinks his audience is not going to just sit down, read the verses and say, what the heck are you talking about? Because your way of telling this illustration absolutely makes no sense. And coming on the back of Tony Morris resigning, being removed, whatever the case might be, from the governing body, coming off of the back of so many apostates making so many videos about just how bad Watchtower mismanages funds, how they said they only gave $12 million, and then a week later, $12 million to humanitarian aid, and then a week later, they buy a, what was it, like $28 million property? It's a real head scratcher again, and it's bad timing. And I don't know if he's trying to respond to some of the criticisms that Watchtower is getting. I don't really know, but I think it's an interesting portal if that is how they respond. Well, look at this illustration Jesus gave about how he was subtly and tacitly comparing this manager to the Pharisees. But what did Jesus really focus on? He really focused on the reaction. So are you wanting people to focus on how you're reacting to all of these claims? And that's by, if you're like the person in the illustration, you follow up dishonesty with being more dishonest? They're trying to make a point using the villain in the anime here. So I don't really know, but yeah, I left this one in, and sorry if it was a little bit boring for none of you Bible nerds out there, but I found it to be pretty fascinating.
The master, on finding out what the steward has done, calls him unrighteous, and yet he commends him for acting with practical wisdom. So here Jesus is not condoning or endorsing the steward's methods, nor is he encouraging crafty business practices. Jesus simply draws attention to the need to be far-sighted and to use practical wisdom.
I swear Watchtower leaders have an inability to actually read Bible verses and understand their meaning in any way. I'm not a Christian, but I spend a lot of time thinking and reading the Bible because I think it's one of the most fascinating books and one of the most important books socially in all of history. But at the end of this passage, in verse 14, it says, "The Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. He said to them, 'You are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's eyes.'" He's not, the whole point of this was not to congratulate the devious licks of this manager. It wasn't to say, "Oh, you are so shrewd. Thank you for your," what did he call it? Your farsightedness. Well, I'm not condoning any shady business practices, but it highlights that we need to be farsighted. What are you talking about, bozo? The whole point is to not have this shady business practices, to not have this greedy love of money. And he's using this in a talk where he is about to tell people that they can donate coconuts to the Watchtower. I kid you not. And this guy uses an illustration about that where Jesus is talking down to the Pharisees for their greed. And using this illustration, he is about to beg for, or say you could donate coconuts. I can't even get my sentences straight. It's just so wild.
Consider the value of $1 50 years ago. If you had $100 in 1969, you would need $692 today to have the same purchasing power. In 1969, a gallon of gas cost 32 cents. A loaf of bread cost 23 cents. Yes, riches fail, and they will definitely fail in the future.
We will get to the coconuts in just a moment, but we need to take a moment to really laugh at this guy. This man who's probably been at Bethel a little bit too long has no idea about inflation and how that actually can be healthy for an economy. He has no concept of this whatsoever. He is so basic in his thinking. It's the equivalent of, well, 5 cents used to buy me a loaf of bread, and now 5 cents doesn't even buy me a gumball. I guess riches fail. Okay, well, what was the income of people in 1969? They're genius. Could it be possible that they have stronger purchasing power because they have increased wages, and that contributes to a healthy economy and diversifies and helps shelter us from monopolies because it allows more opportunity for businesses to get into a particular space and helps competitive pricing so that way, like, things don't get out of control? Like, have you thought about that really there, bucko? No, in his mind, it's, well, a gallon of gas. And man, I used to be able to buy a gallon of gas for $1. Now it's $4. Must be bad. Well, it could be the case that you also went from making $1,000 or $10,000 in a year to $40,000 in a year, and you can afford that higher price point. It's not actual, like, big galaxy-brained concepts to get his head around, but I doubt that this man has spent any time reading Adam Smith. But, you know, I'm kind of a nerd, so what are you going to do about it? Anyway, on to the coconuts.
How do we use the material things of this world to make friends with Jehovah and Jesus? Everything we own actually belongs to them. However, each one of us has a measure of money and material assets that we are free to use as we please. So to make friends with Jehovah and Jesus, we have to use those things in a way that brings their approval. Our contributions don't have to be in the form of cash. In Jesus' illustration, the debt was olive oil and wheat. The unrighteous riches might even be coconuts.
We all remember how shocked we were when we heard that talk where specifically they just came out and said, make friends with Jehovah by giving money. Well, we've reached a new low. It only took a few months, and we have actually hit rock bottom. Make friends with Jehovah. If you have cash, great, but it doesn't have to be cash. It could even be coconuts. And then he goes on to give an illustration about a brother who, instead of selling the coconuts and then giving the money to Watchtower, he just gave the coconuts to Watchtower because it would be more efficient. So I have an idea. Maybe I'm a little bit wild here, but what if we did something super troll to Watchtower? Because it sounds like they're willing to accept anything. And I don't know, maybe we can reseal some Pokemon cards and start shipping some booster boxes over to Watchtower headquarters. And we can all delight in having the mental image of some Bethelites sitting there going through all of these crappy, worthless Pokemon cards just to see if maybe there's a rare one out there. And then, I don't know, like slipping in something that's apostate, or I don't know, maybe that could get a little bit silly and they wouldn't open the rest of them. But I think, hey, if they're willing to accept coconuts, maybe they're willing to accept Pokemon cards. You know, maybe there's someone at Bethel that's like looking to get a PSA 10 rare Charizard or something. Anyway, I think it would be absolutely hilarious. So if anyone has a bunch of Pokemon cards just sitting around that are worthless, maybe we can get the idea rolling. Oh, I don't know. Why limit it to Pokemon? Maybe we go Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever. But anyway, I found this to be absolutely hilarious because this is one of the best examples where Watchtower's not trying to like make a joke. Like sometimes we laugh at them when they make bad jokes, but this is an instance where he is with 100% seriousness saying, it doesn't just have to be with money. It could even be coconuts. Very good stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm sorry if the biblical sections of it were a little bit too long, but maybe I'll make a YouTube short just talking about the coconuts. That way we can get right to the point. But if you're still around, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. And I will see you next time.